Gary O'Neill is the new head coach for AFC Bournemouth. 3 months since Scott Parker left AFC Bournemouth, even took his cardigan with him. We searched high and low for our next head coach, and he was just under our nose. He was even on the payroll, and that is Gary O'Neill. And tonight might bring mixed reviews. We are going to get fans on to hear the opinions, and this gives us an opportunity with this type of announcements to hear how fans are feeling, to give you, the fans, a voice. Ultimately, though, at the end of this video, we do need to get behind Gary O'Neill. We do need to support him because we've got to achieve something. That's staying in the Premier League come May. I'm going to start going around the room, and I'm going to start with the Cherries Red Army team. And I'm going to go with you, John, to start with. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the stream. Gary O'Neill is the next AFC Bournemouth head coach. We were expecting it after reports came out recently. Early thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, as per the last video I did with you, Kirk, we mentioned about 4 or 5 times that I did a video on what I felt were the pros and cons between going for Bielsa over O'Neill and vice versa. Over the course of the following couple of weeks, I think I determined myself that if I was given only the choice between Bielsa and O'Neill, I think O'Neill was the right choice. Only just. It was a close call, and there are definitely pros to either side. And I feel as though maybe the fact that it was just those two seemingly may well be a point of contention tonight. But in terms of over the last couple of weeks, I am certainly happy with this decision.
Aaron, welcome to the stream. We've been waiting for this video for a while now. It comes on a Sunday. I think the team are expected to report back to the training ground tomorrow. It's Gary O'Neill.
Yeah, lay my cards on the table. Not the appointment I would go for necessarily. That's not to say that I don't think there are plenty of pros to Gary O'Neill. There certainly are. As I've said countless times on this channel and to others, you know, he came in at a very difficult time. He steadied the ship, galvanized the squad. He's got a brilliant football brain. But there were lots of issues as well throughout his tenure, certainly the latter part of that. And I think this is nothing, you know, to be fair to Gary O'Neill, you know, I think it's a lot of deja vu with the way the process has gone, the way the board has gone, the way Neil Blake's approached this again. Very similar to when the likes of Tyndall and Woodgate were offered the jobs, when plenty of other names were banded around, big names, small names, whatever you want. And as John's already alluded to, obviously Bielsa was thrown out there by Blake and co. And, you know, it is a bone of contention that they are seemingly the only two. We might talk about Bielsa later. There were certainly a lot of risks involved with appointing Marcelo Bielsa as well, for sure. But they aren't the only two managers out there in football. And I just thought, you know, potentially, for me, and we'll come on to a detail, I'm not convinced that had the World Cup broken before the Everton game, he would have got the job. I think it's quite obvious on the AFCB official website that, you know, after he beat a woeful Everton, I was certainly in the crowd singing the Gary O'Neill song, applauding him, because that was to thank him for the job he'd done over the last few months. Neil Blake made it quite explicit and from what I've been told as well, that changed the mood around the thinking process for sure. The Everton result, the reaction afterwards, which was very much for me, as I said, a kind of thank you very much rather than I want him in. But we are where we are, and I will fully back him. As I said, out of the 12 games he managed, I was there for the majority of them, singing and shouting for him, and I'll continue to do the same.
Mark, welcome to the stream. I'm going to get your thoughts in this video, and I know that you're quite happy with this, but before we dive more into it and get more meat on the bones, how are you feeling when it was announced by the club that Gary O'Neill is the new head coach on an 18-month deal initially?
Well, thanks for having me on, Kirk. Much appreciated, buddy. Finally, we have Super Gary O'Neill, and he knows exactly what we need, and that's Senesi at the back, Kiefer in attack, and Bournemouth are going to stay in the Premier League.
He's got 2 songs now.
He can have as many as he wants, mate. No. I probably sing a slightly different tune to many that are out there, but I am. I think from the start, I always felt with if he was to be appointed, even when he sort of like took the reins from Parker, I think we could instantly see the positive changes that were made in and around the club. Yes, we can talk about the negatives, but I think when we look at the positives that are within those games, the fact that we are scoring goals, we're not getting battered, so to say, in many respects. We are being competitive, and I think in many ways, Gary will learn from these mistakes. And I think, as I said to you guys off screen, and I'm going to probably lay myself on the line here a bit, but I've got a feeling that this could be the second coming. I feel like we've got another Eddie in our midst here, mate, and yeah, he's going to do wonders for us.
That is a big statement from Mark there. I mean, we're basing that off a 12-game interim basis on his current CV. Let's get stuck into it then. The announcement was made by the club. They weren't like at the front of the queue, I wouldn't say, John. I think they got, some of the reporters got ahead of them with Sky Sports releasing it first, but once the club then got their sort of stuff together, they announced it. It's an 18-month deal, potentially another 12 months. And I'm going to put some of the statements on the screen throughout the show. And also Neil Blake talked about how he had gone across positively. And he was also impressed with the way the crowd reacted at the end of that Everton game, which was back-to-back wins against Everton. I think it's difficult to take a cup game into that, but you still have to beat the team in front of you. I was clapping Gary O'Neill and thanking him for his efforts, but wanted him to drop back into a coaching role. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. It's entirely fair. I think I think I was one of many voices that said, if we don't take O'Neill as permanent manager, can we at least try and keep him in the coaching squad setup? Because he's clearly got the support of the players. They enjoy playing for him. They enjoy being coached by him. He has got a very good reputation in coaching circles. You don't become even a youth coach for Liverpool if you don't clearly have something about you. And he survived, through, well, he was brought in by Tyndall. Was he brought in by Tyndall or was he brought in by Woodgate? No, I think he was brought by Woodgate to replace Woodgate. So, through Woodgate, through Parker, now obviously manager now, he's highly rated by the club as well. So I wouldn't have had an issue with that at all. I think if Bielsa had come in, I'm pretty sure he would have been out the door, because Bielsa brings in so many staff and he has his own setup and he wouldn't really want anyone else around. So, it would have needed to be someone else that's a little bit more amenable to having someone involved in the setup that's currently still there, as part of the handover process, as it were. But I also feel as though O'Neill has probably got himself enough of a taste of managerial work that he's probably not looking to be a coach anymore. He's probably looking to take the reins of a club. And he's got a fantastic chance now at Bournemouth.
Mark, let's be fair here. It was back-to-back wins against Everton. 2 questions coming your way, Mark, because you're very much for this. Did it erase the 4 defeats before that? And can we not take that into consideration with his lack of experience and the mistakes he made, because he's learning on the job, and this interim job that he had is going to be very different to the permanent job he's going to have? The pressure is going to be ramped up.
I think those back-to-back victories probably, in many respects, it would have done him a load of favours, would have done him the world of good, and the players as well, of course. I don't think it would have erased the defeat, but I think we can all be down in the dumps in the manner of the defeats, of course. It's literally victory snatched away from us, and from either, you can either look at it like poor tactical management, or you can look at poor individual player performance. But it still remains to be seen that we are competitive within these matches, and we are competitive against the teams that are mainly around us. And we've only played one of the big 6, so to say, since O'Neill's taken over. But even in that game, we went 2-0 up. We looked fairly comfortable, And again, if it wasn't for just that slight bit of better man management, and I'm sure he goes away. The club have got the technology these days now to analyze these situations in detail, and I have no doubt going forward, if these situations were to arise, let's look at the first Everton game in the cup. We were 2-0 up. They sort of pulled one back, looked like they were maybe on like the front foot, and probably in a lot of the fans' minds in that game, we could have capitulated in that game, but no, we went from strength to strength in that. And albeit, people may say it's a poor Everton side, that's still, a massive club that we really took the game to them, and we absolutely demolished them. So I don't have any worries about it, mate. And like I say, I can only see it being a positive going forward. And ultimately, I think from one of the guys I said commented, the players want to play for Gary O'Neill. And that's the main thing. And if we had switched over to Bielsa, there's that threat of, we're having to hit a big reset button. Nobody knows what their position is within the club. Obviously, some may have found out, really quickly. And it would have just, I think, caused a bit of unrest in many ways. But that is just my opinion. I could have been completely wrong. But ultimately, we've got GON in the hot seat.
And it is just opinions, because I wasn't for this. This was my less favourable option. I said I'll back him. Of course I will. One more question for you, Mark, on that before I move to Aaron. If you're able to give one answer, if the World Cup broke before those Everton games, does he get this job?
At the end of the day, I'm not the board. I know we can sort of shake our head easily at it, Aaron, but again, my point comes down to, my opinion comes down to, you look at what we have been doing. I mean, you look at those back-to-back defeats, but then let's look at the 6-game unbeaten run. If the World Cup had broke it then, would Gary O'Neill have got the gig then? Things happen for a reason, and it is my opinion that throughout all of the games, we have remained competitive. There is some learning to be done, which Gary has the opportunity to do now. We've got January coming up. I imagine we're probably not going to do many signings in January, because I think he has that much belief within the players. Depending on the attitudes of, the Lermas, the Zamuras, the Antonys, contract situations, stuff like that. Hopefully, if we can get them nailed down sooner rather than later, then get that club harmonious. And as the club says, together anything is possible.
I'm just interested to know, especially from people that are very for it. So it's just putting it out there. Aaron, look, I looked at this as an opportunity under new ownership for maybe AFC Bournemouth to go down a different road, a road we've never been down before. Now, I know we spoke about Bielsa because that was the name that was being talked about in the journalism point of view. I know there's other names out there. A lot of fans were looking at Knutson. And if your job is to search for the next manager or the next best player in the world, if that's your job day to day, 8 hours a day, you surely can find other managers like that in the world. I'm convinced of it. Other clubs have done it. And other clubs have been successful. You've got De Zerbi now for Brighton. You've seen Graham Potter. You've seen it happen. I just felt this was an opportunity under new ownership when it happens for us to just be a little bit brave and show a little bit more than we have before, because this could potentially be full circle back to where we started when Eddie Howe left.
It does seem a lot of deja vu. I think, it's very Bournemouth. It's very, very the safe option. I think Mark made a relatively good point that, there are risks involved with bringing managers in mid-season. Of course there are, but other clubs have done it. Other clubs have made improvements. We shouldn't be scared necessarily of not going for the safe option the whole time. And I just think, as you say, it's an opportunity where there are so many, and not even Bielsa necessarily, but, so many other managers potentially who we could potentially attract, who have more experience. I think, those 4 games, the Southampton game was just horrific. He got it all tactically wrong in that game. I think the West Ham game, which I went to, was a complete and utter, again, not bringing certain players on until it was too late. And I think, making wrong substitutions in the Southampton game, making wrong substitutions in other games, I think showing tactical naivety. I'd like to think he has learned from that. And hopefully, look, if we'd have played like we did against likes of Spurs and Everton, as we, against Southampton, we probably would have won that game. So of course he's learning on the job, and hopefully he has learned. But Bournemouth, we like attacking front foot managers. Gary O'Neill isn't that. There has been cases in the last couple of games where he's potentially changed that, but I do believe that he's very much cautious first. He's very much kind of trying to nullify the opposition. There's no identity. I think you actually on the Cherries official website today, the players were saying, one of the players said he changes the formation every single game. So it was there in black and white from a player. It's so sometimes there must be confusion about certain roles. There's questions about certain players not coming in the team. We've been crying out for Zamora to play. He finally did play, and he was brilliant. And he's left-sided left back made a huge difference. Jayden Anthony potentially deserves a chance, bringing likes of Ben Pearson into certain games and managing games, certainly against Spurs and Leeds. But yeah, I just think it's a safe option. We've seen it before. I think he is. He's certainly got a better football brain than Jason Tindall, that's for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. But I do see similarities where it's a long process. If you believed in Gary O'Neill that much after the Everton job, give him the job. If you believe in it that much, it's the process again. And again, this isn't Gary O'Neill's fault. This is where I put the blame somewhere that he does feel like he's second. He even mentioned Marcel Bielsa. He's actually said himself, I think Bielsa will be a good fit for Bournemouth. He knew he was coming in, or we knew he was the favourite to come in. And it just seems to me it's very, very Bournemouth, and with potentially big bucks coming in, and as I said, potentially new era. It's sometimes you got to try and look at things a bit differently. So yeah, I don't know. I just think he hasn't earned his stripes. He's not Eddie Howe. He hasn't managed tens of games in the lower leagues like Eddie did, hundreds of games. But he is a very, very good football brain. So I'd like to think he is learning on the job, but I just have my reservations on it.
I do feel like I want to try and balance this out, John, because this is what the channel's about. Mark's on here. He's very happy about it. You have been leaning towards O'Neill the last few weeks. You originally done that video between him and Bielsa, and then you were more leaning towards O'Neill. Come on, talk to me, John, because Gary O'Neill in the summer would have been a coach under Scott Parker. He would never have thought he'll be a Premier League manager where are we? 25th, 26th of November, whenever it is. I mean, he would have laughed if someone would have said that to him. And this interim role, he would have jumped on it as enthusiasm, no expectation, an opportunity for him to, get some experience. Bring something to the table, because I want to believe that this is the right decision.
Well, I would say that yes, there's no doubt that he wouldn't have seen it, but then no one amongst the fans would have seen it. Scott Parker wouldn't have seen that coming either until just after the Liverpool game, where he probably saw the writing on the wall. But I put out a tweet a few days ago, sort of asking people. I know it's not because this is the thing. There are a lot of comments, and this is not a dig at anyone, but I am seeing a lot of comments that saying, why couldn't we have gone a bit different? Or why couldn't we have done this? Or why couldn't we have done that? And there are no managers named. Now, there is, admittedly, this is not the job of the fans. This is not the interest of the fans. They are the people that would want to come out in here and say, okay, the big boys at the club, why aren't you doing something? But I do think that there needs to be a certain level of realism attempted to sort of put into the process here as to what Bournemouth are as a club, what position we're currently in, and also who is available. Bournemouth have the lowest budget in the league. They also are well and truly expected to go down. No matter who comes in, they're under very much no illusions that despite the budget that will probably be in place to some degree, Bournemouth will still have the lowest wage come the end of January in all likelihood. And that wage spent is one of the best indicators as to where a team will end up come the end of the season. So, there's a lot of limitations that you've got to sort of build into what you can do with this team and with this club, with the size of the club, with the size of the stadium, with the infrastructure behind it. So the amount of managers that are of the level that I think that a lot of fans would like to see don't see Bournemouth as a realistic club to what they want to go to. Marcelo Bielsa is the biggest name that we were ever going to likely to get. And Marcelo Bielsa is someone that requires a hell of a lot of buy-in, a hell of a lot of money being spent. He has, from what has been said, he has a hell of a lot of stipulations in terms of all of the backroom stuff that need to come in, the kind of thing that needs to be done to the infrastructure. You only need to look at the stories at Leeds as to how much he did. But the difference is that Leeds were off the back of an awful owner that had basically torn the club asunder, were in the doldrums in terms of where they felt they needed to be, where they felt they should be, and just in the morale in the area. And Bielsa came in and completely revitalized what was a club that was practically on the floor, even though they weren't at their lowest point. Obviously, they were in League One before that. The names that we could realistically get probably aren't going to see Bournemouth, aren't going to be the names that I think a lot of fans would have been excited by anyway, personally. Marcelo Bielsa is the biggest one. Knutson, at the moment, is playing for a team that is in Europe. I don't think he wants to go for a team that is most likely to be end up in the second division of English football within 6 months. I don't want us to be there, but that is just a realistic thing that most managers will look at. I totally understand why people aren't enthused by Gary O'Neill, but when you weigh up all the things, when you weigh up the positives that O'Neill has brought in, when you weigh up the other options, I find it difficult to pick out a manager that I could legitimately go, I think he's less of a risk, I think he's a big enough name, and I think he's going to get more out of this squad. It's incredibly difficult to really pick out, I think, a name, apart from Bielsa, who had all his issues, which clearly couldn't get resolved, that would have garnered the support of the fans more than I think than O'Neill will. But it's a difficult case regardless.
There must be managers out there though, John. If Brighton can find them, if Brentford can find them, De
Zerbi was on our list before he got.
He was, but I would also say look at where Brighton are in comparison to where Bournemouth are at the moment. And De Zerbi was playing with a fantastic Atalanta squad that were fighting for Europe in Italy. Brighton legitimately could try and get to the seventh into Europa Conference League this season. I've just found an article by the Daily Mail that picks out the 10 biggest managers that are out of work at the moment. This was from September this year. Number 10 is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. None of us want him. Okay. Number 9 is Quique Setien. Now, ex-Barcelona, 64% win record and was smashed out from Ronald Koeman. He's not coming to Bournemouth. Frank de Boer, none of us going to want him. Andre Villas-Boas, probably not. Marcelo Bielsa, okay, maybe. Giorgio Sampaoli, very, very highly rated manager, would have been a shout. Rafa Benitez, I don't think he's going to come to Bournemouth. Joachim Low hasn't managed in a club team for ages. Thomas Tuchel, no. And Zidane, no. So, in terms of, and those are the 10 biggest managers, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was number 10. So, in terms of the scope of who is available, it is incredibly, it's actually surprising how small the range is of decently named managers that are out of work at the moment. You'd have to try and get someone out of a job, which is the likes of Knutson. But then again, he's at this right sort of level, but he's also managing a team that's in Europe. So I don't see why he'd want to drop down to the lowest budget team in the Premier League, as much as I think he'd probably be a really good shout. It's just, like I said, it's really difficult to find the sweet spot of manager that I think most fans are looking for.
You're right, John, but the brief was, and it was said by Schubel, and it was said by Chris Temple and Mark McAdam, the brief was a manager with Premier League experience with front foot attacking football. And Gary O'Neill certainly isn't the first one.
No, I agree.
So they deviated from the brief because as you say, it's not up to us to choose managers, but as Kirk said, there's hundreds of managers out there. Many of them we might not want. You're right, but there's hundreds of managers out there, and it's not our job. It's the chief executive's job, and those on that pay scale to try and bring the right manager into Bournemouth. And I can tell you now, for sure, Gary O'Neill was not even considered a few games ago. Not even, it was never going to be. It was always going to be an interim job. Always going to be an interim role. And I know that Everton game changed everything. Can't say how that, but I know that it changed everything. One game.
I mean, I'll quickly just interject on that because I've obviously playing football myself. I've obviously I know a few people that are within the club. Working on something like the academies and so forth like that, and through conversations with them, one of the conversations I had with them was that they had to create player profiles for the under 23s for some that could be potentially move into the first team. So you're right, Aaron, in the aspect that probably maybe even not up until like a couple of weeks ago, it wasn't Gary O'Neill in the running. It was more than likely Bielsa. But quite possibly, I don't think it's the games that's changed it. I think it's the numbers and the figures that were probably going to be involved. And from what I've heard, it may have started with a 6 and had quite a few zeros after it.
For sure, for Bielsa, sure, you're right. Yeah.
So I think in that respect, maybe then the board then have just gone, ooh, hang on a second, Marcelo. Why do you feel that you kind of sort of deserve that? What did you really do with Leeds? You kind of nearly sort of took them down to a degree. But so
I think there's a misconception.
I think that's a bit harsh. Mark,
I think there's a misconception with. I mean, I don't want to dwell on Bielsa because it's an irrelevant conversation now. But I would say there is a misconception with Bielsa. With 4 years he had at Leeds, he progressed them 3 years out of the 4, and they finished 9th. Better than when we finished 9th. I know he's had seasons before at other clubs for Bielsa where he only spent 2 days there and a week there, and he's got a lot of experience. It goes back over 30 years. Bielsa wasn't originally the main guy that I really wanted. I was in for the Knutson or someone similar, or a De Zerbi, or the next Graham Potter, someone who's gone and got their stripes. They've done the time. Let's be real here. And I don't want to bring it down too much, Mark, but this is a crash course that Gary O'Neill's done. It's 12 games. Outside of that, he's had a bit of experience in the academy at Liverpool. He's been a coach for Jonathan Woodgate, and he's been a coach for Scott Parker. We are literally giving him the biggest job of his life. I'm actually worried for Gary O'Neill. If this doesn't go to plan, this could actually set him back 5 years. If he wants to become a manager, I think he should have taken the experience he had with not a lot of pressure, not a lot of expectation, drop back down, maybe become a coach. I can see that people might think that's a demotion, or go into the Championship and really get some more experience, learn about himself. Because we know, Mark, he has sort of flitted around with formations, tactics. I mean, the Southampton games tells you everything you need to know. But I'm sure he's learned stuff going into the Everton game from those 4 games. Yeah.
I mean, I will say, guys, I've not been to enough games this season just because of other commitments and so forth like that. So I'm not seeing the sort of tactical change. So I'm purely just sort of looking at this from a results and I guess a highlights perspective in that. And as I say, from what I've seen from the games, apart from the Southampton one, which somehow we just did not score in that game at all. All the other games we have been competitive in. We have scored goals. So maybe if you're talking from the aspect of not on the front foot, but we're still scoring goals at the end of the day. I mean, ultimately, Kirk, I think for me, and as for many Cherries fans who have been there through the dark days as well, and I know we probably keep going back to that, and there'll be a lot of fans that will turn around and say, but we need to step away from that now because, the dark days are sort of over. But for me, there's always that memory of, I always want my club to be stable. And, regardless of whether and again, numerous fans and even myself will say, look, do you know what? If we go down this year, then brilliant. Do you know what? Bring on the Championship. We all have fun in the Championship. And even if that's, with Gary O'Neill at the helm, or whether it be, I don't know, Graham Potter, or because he doesn't do well at Chelsea, or even if it's, I don't know, Julian Dix, who's just coming out of retirement or something like that. It doesn't matter. The important thing for me is as long as my club is stable, and it just we never see those dark days again. And that's why I have almost complete faith in the board and in their decision process. Of course they're not going to come out and just say, look, we really did want Bielsa, Gary's our sort of second choice, but we couldn't afford Bielsa, are they? That's just not going to be the case. So let's just all strap ourselves in. Let's have a great time with it. Let's get behind the lads, because ultimately you're all going to do it, aren't you? So, let's just have another 25 minutes, okay, of everybody saying why we shouldn't have had Gary O'Neill. All right, let's go watch the Spain game. Let's watch them lose. All right. And then let's, up the flipping Cherries. Come on.
Stay with us for a moment, Mark. John, I'm just going to drop you out for 5 minutes. I'm going to bring Morgan in to see how he feels. So let's just bring Morgan. How are you? Gary O'Neill is confirmed as AFC Bournemouth head coach. He's going to lead the team to Premier League survival, right?
Come on, Morgan.
I think in terms, right, we'll start with some positives and then we'll go on to the negatives. I've been listening to what you've been saying for the last 30 minutes or so, and I think O'Neill has steadied the ship, and I think he has given us what we needed, and the players are competitive, and they will go into training tomorrow and they will play for him. That isn't the issue. I think the issue is the lack of experience that he has in the game as a manager. Kirk, you made a point earlier. This is the biggest job he's ever going to probably have. And that's not to sound naive. I think he's done very, very well, as I said. I just think this is a little bit of maybe a Tyndall Woodgate panic situation. Now, I'm hoping that he can keep us up, which will be an achievement in itself, bring a few more players in, and hopefully then push on from there. I don't see the 12 games that he's currently done, the last 2 being against a bit of a shamble Everton side, one in the Cup, one in the Premier League, being enough. But hopefully, I think the experience in maybe Fletch and Elpic and stuff will help him, or what other coaching staff let the club appoint. Hopefully, he will go on to do good things in the AFC Bournemouth management role.
Yeah, because the club are going to update us with what that backroom staff will look like. Aaron, there's going to be an in-tray for Gary O'Neill as well. There's a January transfer window coming. Let's get into that in-tray. He's got to convince Jeff Lerma, one of our best players in our team, who's been very, very good for us since he walked through the door at AFC Bournemouth. He's got to convince him to maybe sign a new contract because, look, that's £20 million that we could lose for nothing. Jay-Z is a player that's growing, and I'm sure there'll be Premier League interest. That's potentially 10 million that we could lose for nothing. And Jaden Anthony, who's yet to start a Premier League game for Gary O'Neill, is also running out of a contract, who is also potentially 10 million pounds. I'm making those numbers up. I don't really know. But 40 million pounds, he's got to try and convince to sign new contracts.
Well, there's 2 things. There's the ability to attract players, and that's another point I would like to make. I think I would struggle with him being able to attract the sort of players we need, whereas other more experienced managers might be able to. And you're right, retaining players is key as well. That's the other side. You know, Jay-Z and Jaden Anthony have been massively frustrated this season. They haven't been given a much of a chance. Jay-Z more recently has, and he's made a massive difference. And Jaden Anthony's made an impact every time he's played. And you know, why would those 2 youngsters with such a bright future stick around for a manager, not a great name, who hasn't really shown much faith in them this season? Jeff Lerma is a different kettle of fish. Obviously, he's one of the first names on the team sheet. He's going to play every game. But, you know, again, is he going to be tempted to stay under Gary O'Neill? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Only Jeff Lerma can answer that question. You know, again, I'm not going to kick him back to Bielsa because, as I said, there were plenty of risks inherent with him. But a name like him, Lerma might have thought, you know what, I want to play for a manager who's got, you know, all that experience and all that, you know, managing the Argentinian side and has got a bit of a name, and that'd be quite interesting. So again, this is nothing against Gary O'Neill because he can only do what he can do, and he can only be who he is. But I would worry about the ability to attract and retain players. Mark,
your thoughts on Gary O'Neill having to try and get those new contracts for some of those players that have not had a lot of minutes. Lerma's played pretty much every game. Jay-Z's played about 6 out of the 12. Anthony's not started once, but had an impact. I mean, there's a challenge there. And as we have spoken about, another reason why I wasn't really for O'Neill is that pull for bigger, better players to improve our squad.
So I take it then, are we of the opinion then that O'Neill wouldn't be able to dig up another like Lerma-esque type player? Well, are we saying like you know, if we're diving into the you know the dredges of, like, I don't know, Levante again, like this, okay, maybe like the Sergio Ricos. Are we going to say that he's just going to pull out another Juan Iturbe or something like that?
Let's put this right. To be fair, he's a head coach. Now, we all know that means that actually he's not going to have full control. We probably know that this is where Scott Parker's issues come from, that he didn't have a full say in what he wanted or the major demands that he necessarily put on the table. So let's be clear here. We know there's a recruitment team at AFC Bournemouth that normally comes from Hughes, Francis, potentially Elphick's involved.
Hughes is very well thought of, I've heard in the industry.
You know, and credit where credit's due. Hughes can speak about 20 languages. That's very helpful in the situation when you're trying to dip into the European and world market. Now let's be right here, Mark, though. You know, if you're trying to buy a player, and look, there will be players that will play for Gary O'Neill. The guy's a journeyman. He's played for a lot of clubs and he's had a long playing career. I'm sure there is players more locally and nationally that he could convince. I'm just talking about going to find the next Jeff Lerma. Would Gary O'Neill and what he's done so far, would that be enough?
I think I've got to allude back to what I said earlier. I think when it comes to like sort of January, I don't think we're going to be majorly active within that, despite maybe what the media is saying, maybe despite what Bill Foley's saying, unless it's going to be, here's, 50 million, go, pick and mix it, boys, see what you want from it. But then again, there's always a risk in that. We can see what, what's happening with Nottingham Forest. So at the moment, the club is, and the players seem to have a very good and positive balance with everyone. I'll come on to like Jay-Z and Anthony in a moment with that. So I think in many ways, we might get like the odd one or two signing. We got people like Rothwell who, are coming into the fold as well. They just started out. We got maybe like potentially the return of Sariki Dembele, who, looked quite useful in both the Everton games, showed a couple of, a few glimpses there. So these are all creating, new options for O'Neill. So, potentially, I mean, where do we need to look to improve at the moment? Do we, depending on what's going on with Neto, do we look to maybe bring in another keeper in on loan? That's all we're really going to need in that instance. Left back, maybe, I don't know, centre back, replacement for Kelly, depending on how long he's going to be out for. But I think at the moment the squad really sort of picks itself and it speaks for itself. And I think in some ways that may help Gary O'Neill in that sense. It won't give him so much of a selection dilemma, but the players that he does have to then come in, I think he knows then they'll be able to do a job for him. Coming on to the subject of like the contracts and so forth, that's probably one of my only sort of biggest worry with it. But what are we going to do if these guys want to be part of the club? Brilliant, get it signed. Here's 50k a week or whatever you're on and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure, Jay-Z and Anthony could be, due some, big pay wages and that. Lerma, if at the end of the day, if, I think it's probably league position dependent. It could be a case of, look, Jeff, kind of sat, in the relegation area, hovering around it at the moment. Look, if you want to go, mate, we kind of want 10, 15 million for you sort of thing, and get him off the wage bill, then fine. Everyone's going to be absolutely sad to see him going out. What a great servant for the club. But we kind of we'll be able to move on. And I think then with Foley's backing, we'll have a replacement for him in no time, in many respects. So there's maybe not so much of a worry in that sense. Jay-Z and Anthony are the big ones because they are one of our own. They have come through the youth ranks. And of course, we want to see, these players flourish. And we can see that connection between the two of them when they do play. So there's two ways in which mainly probably Anthony can deal with this now. He can either go, right, I'm not starting any of the games at the moment. This second part of the season, I want to be starting the games. I need to, either pull my socks up now and I really need to, sort of go for it. Or he just turns around and he says, look, I don't want to sign a new contract. He does a little bit of a Fraser. We actually do our best to sell him off, or he goes on a free. We move on from it, mate.
Mark, it's been great to have you on. I want to say that you've stuck to your corner well. I did say I was going to challenge you. I knew you were very much Gary O'Neill in, so you've done a good job. I know you'll get behind the Cherries, and we all will, mate. And we'll see what happens. I'm going to bring John back in, but Mark, thanks for coming on. We'll see you soon.
See you all around. Take care. You two guys, all the best.
Fantastic. Let's just bring Jon Spark back into the frame. But I will come straight to Morgan then, because there are some talent. And when we talk about talent, Morgan, if it's to be believed, Bill Foley's going to spend money. He's going to complete that training ground. That will change our category status. That will enable us to get better youth talent, keep the youth talent. And in the short term, we got to make sure we don't lose Jay-Z and Anthony, right?
Yeah, that's two things that you just said there, Kirk. The major one is the training ground, getting that to develop players for the future, if that's revenue and custom, or the likes of what Jaden and Jay-Z have done and come through the ranks and played up. But Jay-Z and Jaden Anthony, I think at the moment, we only have one left back really, don't we? And that is Jay-Z. So if we can keep him on And what he shows is he bombs on. Yeah, sometimes defensively, people might say, oh, he's not the tallest or whatever. But going the other way, he's fantastic. And when he's got Phil Bill and Jaden Anthony working on that little triangle on the left-hand flank, it's absolutely sensational at times. It really is. And maybe now O'Neill been appointed and he can take a few more risks and he's not counting down the game to the decision. Maybe he can play his mate with him down that side, and Anthony and Jay-Z and then Billen can get that what worked under Parker very well back on track. So yeah, it's exciting time. But no, I think Jay-Z is a must, and the same for Jaden Anthony. He's scored twice since he's come off the bench this season.
Yeah, Nottingham Forest.
At least 2. Yeah.
At least 2.
And Leicester, wasn't it? Or was that offside?
No,
that was offside.
That was offside. Yeah, that was right at the end. Right, in the chat, Steve wants Morgan to be the next AFC Bournemouth head coach. But Gary O'Neill beat you to it, Morgan. Maybe next time. Keep throwing your hat in the ring, though. John, right, come on. Gary O'Neill, he probably knows he wasn't the number 1 target. How is that going to make him feel, or is he not going to be bothered? I mean, he's going to cash in on this, but I'm sure it's all about being a Premier League manager that really counts for him.
Yeah, I don't think he'll care, to be honest. And I don't think he really should, because I don't think there's many situations in football management and in life where you're always going to be the first choice, and where you aren't the first choice. You know what I'm talking about. I can't remember where I got my wording wrong on that one, but I mean, most managers that are brought into clubs probably aren't first choice. I mean, Eddie Howe at Newcastle definitely wasn't first choice, but we all knew that he should have been, and he was the right option from the get-go for basically any decent club. But yeah, I really don't think it's going to matter too much to him. I think he was pretty good at making sure that he focused entirely on going game by game as a interim manager, and basically swatting aside any comments at all about whether he would get the job. I think, as we've alluded to, he probably was under no illusions that he wasn't going to get the job. But now that he has, he can just focus on that. He already is well aware of what the structure is like within the club. The one thing I would say is that I doubt he has been very involved in anything to do with the takeover. So I'm not sure what conversations he's had with Bill Foley, if any, or anyone within his circle of arranging the deal. And also was brought up before in terms of transfers. Not sure how involved he would have been in looking at transfer targets up until this point. I'd imagine that will have been done purely by the likes of Hughes and the people in the analytics department and scouting departments about what players they might be looking to bring in. But now that they know it's Gary O'Neill, they know they're looking to give him 18 months. I think he knows what kind of players he's probably going to be looking for. And we've already discussed, we know that we're definitely going to need a left back to challenge and push on Zamora and to stop Adam Smith from playing at left back, because Kirk and I are both very, very, very frustrated that he ever plays there at all, to be honest, instead of JC, as does most Bournemouth fans, I think. But he's got quite a bit in his in tray. But the thing is that he's got a lot less than most new managers would do because of the work he's been able to do over the last 12 games or whatever it's been. So yeah, I think he'll be pretty confident that he can push the squad in the direction that he wants to take them. But I would like to see him try and nail down a style of play. It was been brought up by Aaron, and I have mentioned basically every preview I've been in that he hasn't started the same formation and team apart from maybe once where he has repeated a previous formation and lineup. So I would like to see him try and nail down a Bournemouth style of play under Gary O'Neill, which we don't have at the moment. Our entire style of play is basically counter what they do, which is fine for a lot of teams. But sorry?
that's what he said actually himself in interviews, that he very much focuses on the opposition. And I've said this before, that he hasn't earned his stripes yet. So he's just trying to find a way of getting through a game, being competitive. And Morgan said it, Mark might have said it as well. He's done that. His remit was to make us competitive, try and get some points, lift the lads, steady the ship. And we have to praise him for that. But moving forward as an opportunity now, does he have an identity, John?
Well, at the moment, he doesn't. There's nothing discernible, I would say, apart from the fact that he plays counter-attacking football. There's not really all that much in terms of patterns of build-up play that I can see that really have been generated over the course of the time that he's been there. But at the same time, I don't think we should completely disregard that, because one of the things that was one of the biggest frustrations for me about Scott Parker's time in our championship at Bournemouth is that we didn't counter-attack, that we had zero counter-attacking game. We didn't create a single chance on the counter-attack in a 46-game season, I believe. So now we have the players, we have the ability, we have the pace in attack, and we have some decent players in midfield to help support that, along with a solid base, that we can create a decent counter-attacking style of football and then hopefully push on when we are more established. But at the moment, like, we've got a decent first 11, and we've got actually a better depth than I thought we did initially, considering the cup game, although you've got to bear in mind what level Everton were playing at as well. There is enough in this team to sort of be able to change things up a bit, and I think you have to be able to do that. The worry, of course, at the moment in Gary Neal is that he doesn't change things up within a game enough, I think, which is why we lost out on those 6 points to Leeds and Spurs. But a lot of ifs or buts about this at the moment, because we just don't know whether he's going to change all that much. But based on what we have done, I think he's got a decent blueprint, but he needs to build on that more and try and input something that we can actually see game to game and say, these one or two things is what Bournemouth do. And at the moment, it's basically adapt and counter, and that's it. And I think there's definitely more that I think fans would like to see, considering the kind of history we've got as Bournemouth Football Club, as AFC Bournemouth, in the sort of, nice football that we tend to see under the likes of Eddie.
Sammy, I've seen your comment, and I'm going to come back to that right at the end in about 10 minutes' time before we break for the end of this video, so everyone can get away to watch the World Cup that's exciting and has lots of minutes, about 120 every game. Aaron, I'm going to say it. It's how I've always been. I'm going to put it out there that has Bill Foley potentially given himself 6 months to sit on this? Football is a cruel world, and if it doesn't work out for O'Neill, he probably won't last the 18 months. This could actually be what's happening behind the scenes. And surely Gary O'Neill must have this in the back of his head as well.
Well, look, football's a results business. Like, we're all talking about this. And as you say, ultimately he is the manager now. And if he has a horrific run of results, he'll get the sack. I mean, that's natural. He's not in place for 18 months, come what may. I wouldn't have thought. Yeah. But look, John made a good point. I think my thing is he's got, for me, and this is, everyone agrees on this, he's got an incredibly good football brain. He's a very good coach. He's a student of the game, and he's exceptionally highly regarded. I think he's overthinking too much in games. Certainly that Southampton one, which we keep coming back to, he was really overthinking things. And I think, to be fair, I might be dressed in black, but it's not all doom and gloom. And I'm gonna turn this around slightly, because as Sammy, as people have said in the comments, we are where we are, and I'll be backing him to the hilt. Maybe, just maybe, he has found a bit more of an identity in the last couple of games. I think Kiefer Moore has been instrumental in that, and I think a lot of us people saw him as an impact sub. I think it's quite clear to see when he didn't play against Southampton, he didn't play against West Ham until Dom went off. But whether we like it or not, he causes havoc with Dom, either just behind him or slightly to the right or left, whatever it might be. And he proved it against Villa in the first game. He's proved it against Spurs, and he's proved it against Everton, and he's proved it against Leeds to some extent, and Wales against the USA. To be fair, he is a handful. He's more than just a big lump. And I think maybe now Gary O'Neill, to be fair to him, has seen that that this is potentially the way to go. Kiefer Moore and Dom, up towards the higher end of the pitch together. with a bit more of an identity there that we haven't seen in some of those earlier games he played. So maybe he has learned, and I think he's more. And I'm trying to be positive because there have been great moments under O'Neill. We were up at Newcastle. We got a fantastic point there. We defended brilliantly. We were at Nottingham Forest, one of the best away days I can remember. The Everton game, even as Mark said earlier, that 60 minutes of the Spurs game and 60 minutes of the Leeds game, we were great. If he can work on that other 30 minutes, the in-game management, the substitutions, the tactical nous that experienced managers clearly have, we might be able to see out those games. We have started scoring goals. I think Kiefer Moore in the team is a big presence of that. But time will tell. As he said, we're coming towards the end of it. I'm maybe summing up a bit early, but Germany-Spain kicks off in 5 minutes. I will support him to the hill. I'm not all doom and gloom. People might have watched me today thinking that he's really that. It's not. I'm so anti O'Neill. I just I have some trepidation, some concerns, but they'll put behind me now, and I'll be there at Chelsea on the 27th, screaming his name and fully supporting him.
Morgan, are you good at looking into the future and predicting stuff?
Yeah, just about.
You are, right. Well, AFC Bournemouth come back after Christmas and will be playing Chelsea on the 27th. We'll then have a home fixture against Crystal Palace and then away Tuesday, 3rd of January, 8 o'clock kickoff in Manchester. That'll be nice for John. It'll be Bournemouth, Manchester United. How many points do we get from that? That'll be Gary O'Neill's first 3 Premier League games in full charge.
Well, we have a good record at Stamford Bridge, so I definitely expect at least a point there. I reckon, being optimistic, I'm going to go 6 out of 9. I really can see at least 6 out of a possible 9 points there. I reckon the Chelsea game could be, as I alluded to a minute ago, we do very, very well at Stamford Bridge. I've been there a couple of times and seen Bournemouth win. And if we can get vitality rocking, I can't see us having much of an issue against Palace. I know that might sound optimistic. And even against United, you never know. But I reckon 6 out of a possible 9.
But just to wrap this up, John, with regards to how Gary O'Neill's got to attack the Premier League, the rest of the season, there are cup games in there as well. We know that the last 3 or 4 games, yes, we lost a couple before the Everton game. We know we don't dominate a lot of the ball. We don't create a lot of chances, but we were converting at a good rate, if that's fair to say. Once that conversion stops, if we don't have a better style, we might struggle to score. And that's where Gary O'Neill has to take the time now to think about how he's going to approach the season. What is his identity? Because we won't stay up hoping we can take and convert 1 or 2 chances a game.
No, absolutely not. And that sort of outstanding conversion ratio is very reminiscent of 12 months ago. Where we were talking about how Scott Parker was getting us some really good wins and whatnot, but our conversion rate was somewhat unsustainable. And after a 16-game unbeaten run, everything sort of petered out a bit over the course of the remaining 2/3 of the season, which is a hell of a long time for things to peter out over, but I kind of did. I totally agree with you, Kirk. The only thing would be that it's a very difficult thing to just fix, particularly when you're a team that will be fighting relegation. You are going to expect to not have a lot of chances in games, and you rely on your players to be able to put away what few chances you do get. I mean, if you remember the Leeds game, everything looked great. Kiefer Moore missed an absolute sitter in that game, and we will have situations like that before. Dominic Solanke last season went through a decent phase where he was getting some really good headed chances, couldn't put a single thing even on target, let alone in the back of the net. So, you could argue that maybe, you want to shore that up with strikers. And I do think we need another striking option. There's no doubt about that. We only really have 2 on the books, but you also need the creativity for that. And the one thing I would say is that at least we've got someone like Tavernier who is starting to show his stripes somewhat more. He's got 4 assists in 2.5 games, which is the kind of record that, again, is not necessarily sustainable, but you you can start questioning your strikers when they're not getting you can question your strikers when they're getting chances they're not putting away. You have to question everyone else when they're not getting the chances. And at the moment, they're not really getting many chances, and they're bailing us out a bit in terms of really good conversion rates. And Billing is definitely amongst that in terms of high conversion rates as well. So I do think that's going to be part of the thing that O'Neill needs to settle down and figure out as well, because it's not like we don't have players that can create for us. We've got Lewis Cook is currently our top creator, and that's kind of perked up a bit out of nowhere. He was doing okay, but his creative numbers have actually really jumped up a bit in the last sort of half a dozen games. Tavernier similarly. Ryan Christie, we need to see a lot more from that if he plays. But then I think that Jaden Anthony is a fantastic creator, and he's not getting much game time. So the players are there at the moment, I think. But we're playing in probably the most difficult league in the world, so it's going to be a difficult job, and one or two additions will definitely help. But then again, I suppose if Kirk, you or I could answer these kinds of questions, we'd already be in this job as a 1-2 pair, I'm sure. But unfortunately, that's for a different timeline.
I would never have a chance at getting this job. I have no idea what I'm talking about. There's enough people that tell you that on Twitter. Jon, thank you for giving us your thoughts on Gary O'Neill becoming the new AFC Bournemouth head coach. You were leaning towards him. You're going to back him. Of course, all of us are going to back him, but thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me on again, Kirk.
Aaron, I know you wanted something a little bit different, but it is what it is. You'll get behind Gary O'Neill. You'll be going to nearly every home game and away games as well, and you'll be singing his name.
Totally, 100%. It's done. It's dusted. Decision's been made, and yeah, absolutely, fully backing him.
Just like Sammy has said in the chat, please do hit the like button on this video. We do try to aim for about 50 likes overall. Morgan, been great to get your input as well. As always, you're going to back the Cherries, and you'll back Gary O'Neill, and you'll hope he'll get the job done and keep us in this Premier League. Yeah,
absolutely. Firstly, thanks for having me on. And secondly, there's no more talk about who's the manager now. He's done 12 games. He's done what he came in to do. He steadied the ship. Some people are going to be angry that he's got the job. Most people hopefully will be positive, but it's the end of the story now. We've got to back him at that first game at Newcastle when we played them in the fourth round of the Cup.
We talked about those Premier League games after Christmas, but Morgan's absolutely right. There is a game midweek against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. Let's come back to that last comment then and finish where Sammy says, in a nutshell, O'Neill is appointed head coach. We could debate the decision all night, but it won't change it. So now all we can do is hope he proves himself, and he proves any doubters, including me. And I would love to see Gary O'Neill do very well. But we've got to get behind him. We've got to do the best that we can to help the team survive, because that's what we want. And then look, then the dreams might be upon us in future seasons with new training grounds, new stadiums, and we'll have to see. But look, good luck to Gary O'Neill. We'll support you. Any more comments coming through, we'll see him on the outro. Thank you to Jon. Thank you to Aaron. Thank you to Morgan. Thanks to Mark for also coming on. But Gary O'Neill, you are top dog now. You're going to take this team, and whatever your backroom staff looks like, into the rest of the season. Look, maybe a little cup run. Look, just finish 17th, and I'm sure we'll be all happy. But make sure you stay connected with Cherries Red Army. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, because there'll be more content coming when it drops. Maybe a new takeover. But until the next one, we'll see you very, very soon. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Take care and have a good week. See you soon. Up the Cherries.
Up the Cherries.